Democratic anti-Trump resistance is old. That's the subject of Semafor journalist David Weigel's latest piece. In with the old, the anti-Trump resistance comes of age. Congressman Al Green and Senator Bernie Sanders have become faces of the resistance with defiant cane-waving stunts and flashy protests.
As Weigel points out, quote, the second Trump resistance has proven more challenging for Democrats than the first, when most of their voters supported their ad hoc fight back. Polling has found widespread dissatisfaction with their leaders and confusion about what they're doing to stop Trump. Now, will Senator Chuck Schumer join Green and Bernie Sanders and lead the charge to shut down the government? Joining us further to discuss this is the legendary David Weigel, a politics reporter for Semafor. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's good to be here. Thanks for bringing me on.
Dave, lots of red flags everywhere for my party. Tell us how we got here in the first place, and what does that say about what we need to do right this second to make a shift?
In this moment, Democrats, like I said, that graph, thanks for highlighting that one, are really angry at their party. And I say confused, not in a pretentious, I'm a Beltway insider, they're not way. But it is hard to follow what the Democratic resistance looks like. It has different components. There is a legal component that's doing pretty well. These attorneys general and Democratic law firms suing to stop Doge or slow it down. And then there's the congressional component, which is really impotent. According to the Constitution, doesn't have the power to slow things down, except as it's doing right now with the CR. It can block spending in the Senate. Before we got on to talk about this, the chatter I was seeing from the liberals I follow and leftists I follow was just fury at Democrats for even considering funding the government. And that's a pretty impossible position for Democrats to be in. So that explains why when they see a Democrat like Al Green or Bernie Sanders taking a stand and not necessarily winning, just explaining and attacking Republicans, that's exciting to them in a way that just grinding down and losing in the Congress is not.
Yeah, it's a very tough position the Democrats find themselves in right now, where they don't really know what the strategy should be for opposing Trump and becoming more popular. And it's really not obvious what the strategy should be because they have different components. There's just not, the level of mass protesting in the streets is not there right now that might, feel like make them feel like they have to do something. You're right that I think certain liberals were happy about, for instance, the Al Green stunt at the address. A lot of other people thought it was, totally ineffective. Even people who don't like Trump, I think, thought it was just kind of, well, what was the point of that? It felt maybe a little insincere or just for show. Do you think they are actually liberals, Democrats, rank and file activists, the various contingents of the Democratic Party, who is excited for the potential of a government shutdown and who is not? Is it just, we got to do something, how dare you go along with this, even if it's going to be not really a short-term or long-term win?
No, it's the last thing you said, that we got to do something. And what do Green and Sanders have in common besides their age? Their age is part of it. They both come from a baby boomer generation that was there for the Vietnam War, was there for the iconic fights of the left that every left-wing group, if I'm not overgeneralizing, evokes when they're fighting something, right? You can see this when the tactics that even environmental groups use are inspired by civil rights groups and immigrant rights groups. And they look to these elders of the movement as exemplars of what should be done to win. They forget that the left got things done in the 60s because they controlled the government. They had LBJ and supermajorities. All the left-wing programs that were successful were from that. But there is this desire from there, I'd say it's a meta narrative among liberals and the left, that when people stand up and resist, they win. And Democrats in Washington are going through not the motions, but going through the normal process of trying to use cumbersome and not very effective, if you're a minority, government tools to negotiate, to get leverage, to lose leverage. That's just not inspiring. Going protesting and saying we're going to burn the whole thing down, that's very inspiring. And Sanders is not saying burn the whole thing down. Sanders is making an electoral argument, if you listen to his speeches, saying we need to just organize against Elon Musk and win these next elections and save the country from the billionaires. But that's more exciting than, look, we need to maybe slow this CR down by a few days. And the final point I make on this is it's Republicans are being revolutionary without having to work very hard, because the reason so many supported the CR is because Donald Trump J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, made this promise to them, and hey, you're going to vote for spending, but look at Doge. They're not even going to send the checks out. I'm quoting Rich Hudson from North Carolina. These checks are not going to go out. Don't worry about the spending. That's what Democrats in the base see happening on the Republican Party, and they look at their leaders and say, "Hey, those guys are breaking the rules and breaking the law, and they're winning sometimes. Why can't you do that?"
Yeah, we've heard a lot of that sort of criticism from Democrats recently. And if you look at the numbers, you look at the big picture, the suffering that's happening from an economic standpoint at this particular moment, it seems like Democrats have a lot of fodder for criticizing what's happening in this administration. However, we heard the great James Carville recently make a very strong argument that Democrats should in many ways just roll over. What do you think about that, Dave?
Yeah, by rolling over, looking at his column, I know what he's talking about. It's that if Republicans get to run the country and they're associated with everything happening, Democrats will benefit because it's not going to work. And this is basically the theory of Republicans in 2009, 2010. I mean, this is the funny thing in politics is you never win by fighting the last war, but the only thing you have is the last war. So they're invoking what worked for the right in the past with very different principles. The right wants to shrink the government down. It's doing generational projects here by getting rid of the Department of Education and to a lesser extent USAID. The left's projects involve winning big majorities and passing bills in cumbersome ways. So it's really hard to find a model that works for what Democrats want to do. But all this goes back to I'll make another reference to history here, but in 2017, Democrats were a little more excited by how their party was resisting because there was a sense, and just go back and read the columns, read the watch the late night shows, hosts, look at what won Oscars. There was this sense that there are rules among Democrats, and Trump is going to break these rules, and he's going to have to go at some point. He's going to fire James Comey. That's illegal. He'll have to resign. He's going to be impeached, and Republicans will abandon him, something, or something, or something's going to happen, a deus ex machina, and he's going to go. And they don't think that anymore. And that broke, not just after 2020, but that broke in 2024 with the Supreme Court's ruling on whether Trump could be prosecuted for actions he took as president. When the Supreme Court said no, that was really a shudder that went out across all Democrats saying, okay, there's actually no way to slow Trump down except for beating him in an election. And they didn't. So they don't have a way to beat him in an election. They have referenda coming up. For example, Wisconsin Supreme Court race on April 1st that they're going to try to make into choices on Trump. But they don't have some way to just beat him systematically. It has to be done. You have to beat Republicans in elections. And that is just, I wouldn't say less inspiring, but that is more of a slog than they thought they were getting into when Trump first arose in the scene. They really did. If you talk to Democratic activists, they really did think there's something, there are norms, there's a system, and something's going to save us. There's a norm fairy that's going to come in through the window like Tinkerbell, and it's going to save us somehow. And they don't think that. And that really, I think, runs through all of their misery at how to deal with Trump. Even when they win in court, as they've done, as I've been saying a number of times, the administration has already fired people in these agencies, or it will go and appeal and see what it can do, get the injunction lifted, or maybe even break the TRO because who's gonna enforce it? A temporary restraining order. Just that, I want to repeat myself too much, but that's why Democrats are saying who is leading us and who is inspiring us and who can smash this system. And I think one piece of this is Trump could do it. They're not looking for their own Trump, but they're looking for somebody who can inspire people enough to shake this system up the way he did, because they're slowly realizing that minute by minute that there is not just a normal system that you can pull a lever and come back to. Politics can be revolutionary. It's Republicans doing the revolution.
You know, we hear a lot of that saying that politics is downstream of culture, and I think all these problems tie together a little bit in terms of the advanced age of so many in our government in general. This is a Republican problem as well, but especially on the Democratic side, the advanced age of some of the leaders, people who've been in Washington forever, just not being with the times. You know, there's been this massive vibe shift to the right in terms of young people on social media. Elon Musk purchasing X and making it into more of a right-wing platform has something to do with that. But the kind of, media, there was such a healthy and robust media ecosystem of progressive voices and activism that went hand in hand with Bernie Sanders' rise and from the 2015 to 2020 period. I see so little of that now, and I just want what do the Democrats have in terms of a cultural, like their capture of culture? They used to have such like a monopoly over popular culture that they have totally lost in a short period of time. And it's like, what are the soft persuasion methods to get people more excited for democratic figures or progressive cultural or political values? Like, all of that has kind of gone away.
Yeah, they don't have one. I would say Saturday Night Live's opening sketches often do get around, and if they're funny enough, can make people laugh who are not even Democrats. But they don't have that ability to even freeze and polarize something, make something infamous, and make something the subject of fun. I see. Sanders actually is an important figure in that, because remember, it was Sanders went on Joe Rogan's podcast at, I guess, what is in retrospect the height of liberal cancel mindset. There was a huge backlash from progressive media and from other Democratic candidates that Sanders would go on and platform Joe Rogan. And that is not how Democrats think anymore. A lot of things they do, that's one of my least favorite words in journalism is quietly. Quietly means you didn't have a press conference and say it. But yeah, quietly, Democrats have been realizing we did lose the culture. We need to have a concord with the new culture that has overwhelmed us, and find young people who don't watch traditional news, don't watch SNL, don't watch Stephen Colbert. That's kind of what Sanders still does some of that. That's what Newsom's doing to an extent. And I bring that up because he's getting lambasted by the left for doing it. I've seen a lot of criticism, and I'm not trying to be super generic. I've seen you had Adam Kinzinger, who's part of the kind of left's coalition now. But on Blue Sky, a lot of influential liberals there saying, "How dare he do this? There's a way to beat Steve Bannon and Charlie Kirk. It's not going on and having a conversation with them." What Newsom's trying to do, and what Sanders was always very good at and still does, is saying, "No, if I'm in that space, people will hear me in that space and say, well, at least he can talk to me." And I've heard that from a lot of Democrats who won their elections in November, congressional Democrats, because they, by and large, did better than Kamala Harris. And they think an advantage for them is that, just as some people who have to run every 2 years or 6 years, as people who have their own media strategies, they build up more of a reputation as people who can enter a room and take questions, and they know they're screwed if they can't, because if they can't, $20 million will come in and define them anyway. And so what Newsom's doing, he's not one of the old Democrats that we're talking about, but it's like what Sanders was doing at the height of Democrat cancel mania, of saying, I will go in and talk to anyone. I don't care. I'm not going to say this outlet had a crazy vaccine opinion, or this outlet's too right wing. I'm going to try to make my case, because as you guys know better than anybody, just in the world of podcasts, if somebody is just interesting and they sound like they're listening to you and they respond, it is hard to exit that conversation and say, I hate that person. No, they tried. And that is what, without changing a ton of their policies, because that's much harder, that's what you've started to see Democrats do, is say, okay, we're going to go on Bill Maher, and people are going to yell at us for going on Bill Maher, but that's fine. Bill Maher's going to say something that offends people about trans people and gender identity. We have to do that because a lot of our voters that we lost, especially like in Texas, Latino voters, don't agree with us on that. So can we in some way talk to those voters? They've not figured us out. Or we're having a conversation about something they've not figured out. But that's what's happening, and I think you've noticed over the last couple of weeks, the left that used to have the ability to say, don't go into that room, don't talk to that person, don't take that position, people are not listening to them. People in the Democratic Party are not listening to them. Sanders has the credibility for running for president and being in his final term as a senator and famous. And other Democrats are tipping in that direction. The people lost in all this are those kind of cultural, I would say, cultural commanders. I think of the best way to put it. People who were used to having a lock on the culture and are still in this mindset that there's a right way of doing things. There are norms in how the government works. There's a direction by how in which social progress moves, and these guys are going to figure out eventually they're moving in the wrong direction. the other Democrats have said maybe not. Maybe there's not one direction that culture and politics move, and we actually need to get in there and fight in places that are not comfortable. And that's not exactly what Green was doing, but Green was doing that in the norms universe of Congress, saying, "Yeah, I'm going to get yelled at because I broke the norms of Congress. I'm going to get censured. Who cares?" I think that was pretty. Having talked to him about this, pretty sophisticated because uh, if Democrats slow down and pay attention, has being censured by the Congress done anything bad for anyone's career in politics? It really hasn't. It did not matter for Marjorie Taylor Greene. Did not matter for Eric Holder. It did not matter for Joe Wilson. They all raised money off it. And some of them are having trouble with this because they love those norms. They're the party of government, the party of the bureaucracy. They want them to be as strong as possible. And a lot of the more innovative ones, young and old, are saying, nope, doesn't work. Sorry, you're trying to rebuild a castle out of sand after the tides rolled in. Like, what are you doing anymore? You have to move on. That is the emerging thinking in the party, and that's been actually kind of exciting to watch because they did. There's a world where they won the 2024 election. I don't think they're reinvestigating how they talk to people in the same way.
Yeah, I agree very strongly with that. Linda and I were just talking a minute ago about Gavin Newsom's very interesting podcast, and it works. It does. Like, even I think he seems, even though I dislike his policies and his governance, it's making him seem a bit more relatable. Not everyone can succeed in that kind of environment where you just talk for a long period of time, just to someone else, someone you don't agree with, and come off well. Kamala Harris, I'm not sure, could succeed in that environment or prove that she could succeed in that environment. Maybe she could in some future. Gavin Newsom actually kind of is demonstrating he can succeed that way. So it's very interesting. Got to leave it there. Dave Weigel, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
It was great, guys. Thanks for letting me expound on it because it's a big topic. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Yep.
Next up, your glass of wine may have just gotten a lot more expensive. That's bad news for this guy. The latest on Trump's tariff war.